My name is Rebecca Sullivan, and I'm 27 years old. As I gripped the steering wheel, driving toward my childhood home in Montana, my heart pounded against my ribs. 5 years of absence, and now I was returning with Colonel insignia carefully hidden in my duffel bag. My family had always treated my military career like an embarrassing phase I'd never outgrow. Tomorrow, at my father's company event, everything would change. But before I continue this incredible story of vindication, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and smash that like button. Trust me, if you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, this story will show you exactly how sweet revenge can taste when served ice cold. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the familiar driveway. I sat there for a moment, staring at the house that held so many memories of disappointment and dismissal. The same peeling white paint, the same crooked mailbox that my father never bothered to fix. Nothing had changed, which somehow made everything feel worse. I grabbed my bag and walked to the front door, my civilian clothes feeling strange after years of wearing uniform with pride. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. "Rebecca! You actually made it," my mother Patricia called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that familiar note of surprise, as if my keeping promises was somehow unexpected. She didn't even come to greet me properly, just continued whatever she was doing in the kitchen. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me immediately. That mixture of old furniture polish and my mother's vanilla candles that I remembered from childhood. Nothing had changed. The same family photos lined the hallway, though I noticed none of them featured me in uniform. The same worn couch dominated the living room, and that same atmosphere of judgment hung in the air like smoke. My father, Michael, had worked at Titan Defense Corporation for over 30 years, climbing from junior engineer to senior executive, through sheer determination and corporate politics. Our entire family revolved around his career success and the shadow it cast, a shadow my brother David had eagerly stepped into, while I had apparently wandered off into the wilderness of military service. "Your brother will be here soon," my mother informed me as I entered the kitchen, not bothering to ask about my flight or how I'd been. "He just got another promotion. Senior project manager now, can you believe it?" The pride in her voice was unmistakable, the kind she'd never used when discussing my career. "That's wonderful," I replied, the words feeling mechanical after years of practice. "I'll have to congratulate him." My mother continued bustling around the kitchen, chattering endlessly about David and his wife Sarah, their new house, their perfect corporate life, and all the achievements that made them the golden children of our family. Not once did she ask about my life, my work, or anything I'd accomplished in the 5 years since I'd been home. I excused myself and headed upstairs to my old bedroom. Like everything else in this house, it remained frozen in time. Cheerleading. Trophies from high school still gathered dust on the shelves. Academic awards from college were still pinned to the bulletin board, and my acceptance letters to various universities were still taped to the mirror. What wasn't displayed anywhere in this shrine to my potential were any acknowledgments of my military career. No photos from my commissioning ceremony, no shadow, boxes displaying my ribbons and medals, no newspaper clippings about my deployments or promotions. In their minds, I had squandered my potential the moment I chose service over corporate success. I sat on my childhood bed, running my hands over the familiar quilt my grandmother had made, remembering the night I told them about my ROTC scholarship. My father had looked at me with such disappointment that I almost changed my mind right there. "The military is for people without options, Rebecca," he had said, his voice heavy with judgment. "You're too smart for that." Even then, they had been grooming David to follow in my father's footsteps at Titan Defense. My brother had embraced the plan enthusiastically, thriving on the favoritism and using every opportunity to remind me how much more successful he would be in the real world. I opened my suitcase and carefully removed the garment bag containing my dress uniform. Tomorrow, Titan Defense Corporation would be hosting their annual leadership conference, and my father had mentioned that the CEO, Victoria Chen, would be visiting their Montana branch personally. What my family didn't know was that I was now the military liaison for the $1.4 billion defense contract between the Army and Titan Defense, a position I had earned through years of dedication, sacrifice, and expertise in cybersecurity systems. My fingers traced over the Silver Eagle insignia of my colonel rank, achieved faster than almost anyone in my division's history. At 27, I was one of the youngest colonels in the modern Army, specializing in advanced cyber warfare defense systems, the very technology Titan was contracted to develop for the Pentagon. I carefully hung my uniform in the closet, making sure it was completely hidden behind some old clothes. For tonight, I would endure one more family dinner of dismissal and condescension. Tomorrow would be different. The doorbell rang, announcing David's arrival. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders like I was preparing for battle, and went downstairs to face my family. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered, made cramped by the oversized personalities gathered around the mahogany table. My brother David had arrived with his wife Sarah, both dressed in expensive business attire that screamed corporate success. My cousin Jessica had also been invited, which didn't surprise me. She worked as a senior finance director at a prestigious investment firm and was often held up as another example of what I should have aspired to become. "Rebecca, you remember Jessica, right?" my mother said, as if we hadn't grown up together. "She just closed a $50 million deal for her firm." "Hi, Jess," I said, giving her a genuine smile. Unlike my immediate family, Jessica had always been kind to me, even if she didn't understand my choices. "It's so good to see you, Becca," she replied, giving me a warm hug. "It's been way too long." The conversation started pleasantly enough as we served ourselves from the elaborate spread my mother had prepared. My father Michael sat at the head of the table, occasionally checking his phone for work emails despite my mother's disapproving glances. "So, Dad," David began, predictably steering the conversation toward himself, "I wanted to tell you about the new project I'm heading up. Victoria personally selected me to lead the entire team." My father beamed with pride. "That's my boy." "Victoria Chen doesn't hand out responsibilities lightly. You must have really impressed her." "Well," David continued, shooting me a glance to make sure I was paying attention, "it's the same project you've been working on for years, Dad. Victoria says my fresh perspective might help move things along faster." I bit my tongue, knowing that the project he was referring to was actually the Army contract I was now overseeing. If only they knew how much authority I actually had over the success or failure of David's new position. My mother Patricia immediately jumped in, eager to showcase David's achievements. "Tell them about the team you're managing now, sweetheart." David puffed up with pride. 15 direct reports, including 3 senior engineers who've been with the company for over 20 years. They weren't too happy about reporting to someone younger initially, but they came around when they saw my results. "That's wonderful," my mother cooed, then turned to me with a thin smile. "Rebecca, how is your job going? Are you still at the same rank?" The dismissive way she said job rather than career wasn't lost on me. "Things are going well," I replied simply, not willing to reveal my promotion yet. "Still a captain or whatever?" my father asked vaguely, not even knowing the correct progression of military ranks. "Something like that," I answered, taking a bite of mashed potatoes to avoid elaborating. "You know," my mother interjected, "Jessica just bought a beautiful new condo downtown. 4 bedrooms with a gorgeous view of the mountains." Jessica looked uncomfortable at being used as a comparison point again. "It's really not that impressive," she said graciously. "Just good timing in the market." "Still," my mother continued, "it's nice to see young people establishing themselves properly, building equity instead of moving around every few years." The dig at my military lifestyle was crystal clear. I had lived in 6 different states and 3 different countries in the last 8 years, something my mother considered unsettled and immature. Speaking of tomorrow, my father said, thankfully changing the subject, the CEO is coming to review our branch personally. It's a huge deal. Victoria Chen doesn't visit regional offices often. I already have my presentation ready, David boasted. Victoria already emailed me personally to say she's looking forward to my innovation proposal. Is there anything special planned for the visit? I asked innocently. My father nodded enthusiastically. Full executive staff meeting, comprehensive, project reviews, and a special announcement about the military contract. Some colonel is supposed to come as the Pentagon liaison, but I doubt they'll send someone that high-ranking to Montana. Probably just some major who'll be impressed by our operation. I suppressed a smile. That sounds interesting. Not really, David scoffed. Military types never understand the business side of things. They just follow orders and check boxes. David, Jessica said with a frown. That's not fair. But my brother was on a roll now. Come on, we all know the truth. The military is a fallback career. People who can't cut it in the real competitive world hide behind ranks and regulations. My mother nodded in agreement. We always knew you were so brilliant, Rebecca. That's why it was such a disappointment when you chose that path. What exactly do you think I do in the Army? I asked, keeping my voice level. Push papers? Follow protocols? My father shrugged. Important work, sure, but not exactly challenging for someone with your potential. You'll never be anything significant there, David laughed. 10 years from now, you'll still be taking orders while I'm running my own division. The words stung. Despite all my accomplishments, years of therapy had helped me recognize that my family's approval shouldn't define me anymore, but old wounds run deep. I think Rebecca made a choice that works for her, Jessica attempted to defend me. A waste is what it is, my mother sighed dramatically. All that potential. Remember how all your teachers said you could run a Fortune 500 company someday? I pushed food around my plate as they continued dissecting my supposed failures and missed opportunities. The conversation moved on to David's upcoming vacation to the Bahamas, Sarah's promotion at her law firm, and Jessica's investment portfolio. No one asked about my recent deployment to Eastern Europe, the specialized training I had completed at the Pentagon, or the commendations I had received for developing new cybersecurity protocols. As dessert was served, my father mentioned again how important tomorrow's meeting was for his career. 28 years I've put into Titan Defense. This contract could be what finally gets me to vice president. I nodded sympathetically, knowing that tomorrow would change everything, though not in the way he expected. Later that night, I retreated to my childhood bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. From down the hall, I could hear my parents still discussing David's achievements. He really is exceptional, my mother was saying. Victoria would be foolish not to see his potential for senior leadership. I closed my eyes, fingers tracing the Colonel insignia. I had slipped from my bag. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Sleep evaded me as I stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to my ceiling, relics from a childhood when my potential had been measured differently. Back then, before David started working at Titan Defense, before my decision to join ROTC, my parents had seen something special in me. But that changed the moment I chose a different path than the one they had planned. I remembered sitting at this same dining table during my sophomore year of college, ROTC brochure in hand, explaining how the program would pay for my education and provide a career path I found meaningful. The military? My father had asked, his face contorting as if I had suggested becoming a street performer. That's for people who can't get real jobs, Rebecca. It is a real job, I had countered, and it's what I want to do. My mother had exchanged worried glances with my father. But what about law school or business school? You always said you wanted to work at Titan Defense someday. No, they had always said that. I had merely nodded along, trying to be the daughter they wanted. When I stood my ground, the subtle undermining began. My achievements in ROTC went unacknowledged. My commissioning as a second lieutenant was attended only by Jessica, who drove 8 hours to be there when my parents suddenly had unavoidable work commitments. My father had David's promotion to junior analyst at Titan Defense framed and mounted in his home office, while my military portrait remained hidden in a drawer. Yet despite their dismissal, my career flourished beyond anything I had imagined possible. My aptitude for systems analysis and cybersecurity had been recognized early. By 24, I had been promoted to captain and assigned to a specialized unit developing defensive protocols against emerging cyber threats. By 26, I had reached major after leading a task force that identified and neutralized a sophisticated attack on military infrastructure, saving countless classified documents and potentially lives. Colonel Maria Martinez had been my first true mentor, seeing potential in me that my family refused to acknowledge. "Sullivan," she had said after a particularly grueling training exercise, "you think differently than the others. That's going to take you places." Under her guidance, I learned to trust my instincts and leverage my unique perspective. When a routine security audit revealed patterns others had missed, Maria encouraged me to pursue it further. The investigation ultimately uncovered a coordinated attempt to breach multiple defense systems. The operation I subsequently led earned me an early promotion to lieutenant colonel and put me on the Pentagon's radar. Maria, by then a brigadier general, had personally recommended me for the Titan Defense liaison position. "They're developing next-generation security protocols," she had explained. "We need someone who understands both the technical and strategic implications. Someone who can speak the language of both military and corporate worlds." When she pinned the silver eagle of full colonel to my uniform just 6 weeks ago, the ceremony was attended by generals and Pentagon officials, but not my family. I hadn't even told them about the promotion. Years of dismissal had taught me to stop seeking their approval. "Colonel Sullivan," General Martinez had said afterward, "I hope you realize what an achievement this is. Youngest colonel in Cyber Command's history." I did realize it, but tomorrow would be the first time my family would understand what I had truly accomplished. The Titan Defense contract was massive, $1.4 billion for developing advanced cybersecurity systems for military applications. As liaison, I had final approval on all major decisions, technical specifications, and budget allocations. In the most literal sense, I would be overseeing my father's and brother's work. The irony was almost too perfect. For years, they had belittled my career choice, and now I held significant influence over the project that could determine their professional futures. I got out of bed and removed my uniform from the garment bag. The midnight blue fabric was immaculate, brass buttons gleaming even in the dim light of my childhood bedroom. I ran my fingers over the rows of ribbons and medals, each representing missions, achievements, and sacrifices my family knew nothing about. The Silver Eagle insignia caught the light as I turned the uniform jacket in my hands. I remembered my father once saying, "Ranks don't mean anything in the real world, Rebecca. Out here, it's about what you can produce, not what title they give you." He would learn tomorrow that in my world, this rank was earned through proving exactly what I could produce, repeatedly, under pressure, and against overwhelming odds. I meticulously inspected every detail of my uniform, checking for loose threads or spots that needed attention. The ritual calmed me, the familiar routine grounding me against the emotional turbulence of being home. By the time dawn broke, I had moved past the hurt of yesterday's dinner. The uniform hung ready, my hair was precisely pinned according to regulation, and my resolve was unshakable. Today, Colonel Rebecca Sullivan would report for duty, not the disappointing daughter they thought they knew. I dressed with practiced efficiency, each button and pin placed with precision. The person in the mirror reflected confidence, authority, and purpose. No trace remained of the insecure girl who had once desperately sought her parents' approval. As yes, I pinned the Colonel insignia to my collar. I reminded myself that this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about finally allowing my family to see me as I truly was, for better or worse. If they couldn't accept my success on my terms, that would be their loss, not mine. I checked my watch, a gift from General Martinez. It was time. The company event would begin in an hour, and I needed to arrive early to coordinate with the security team. Downstairs, I heard my parents and David preparing to leave separately. They had no idea I would be joining them, much less in what capacity. I waited until I heard their cars pull away before heading downstairs and out to my rental car. The drive to Titan Defense Corporation took exactly 18 minutes. I used the time to center myself, reviewing key points about the contract I would be discussing today. This wasn't just about showing my family who I had become. It was about ensuring a critical national security project received the oversight it required, as ETSI. I pulled into the parking spot marked Military Liaison. I straightened my uniform one final time. The weight of responsibility settled comfortably on my shoulders, far more natural than the weight of family expectations ever had. It was time to step into the role I had earned, regardless of who might be watching. The Titan Defense Corporation. Headquarters loomed before me, a gleaming monument to corporate success and military-industrial partnership. The glass and steel structure housed some of the most advanced technology development in the country, including the cybersecurity systems I was now responsible for overseeing. Security at the entrance was tight, as expected for a facility with multiple classified projects. I approached the guard station where two security officers straightened immediately upon noticing my uniform and rank. "Good morning, Colonel," the first guard said, instantly recognizing the silver eagle on my shoulders. "May I see your identification, please?" I presented my military ID and project authorization. "Colonel Rebecca Sullivan, Pentagon Liaison for Project Titan Shield." The guard's eyes widened slightly as he processed my clearance level. "Yes, ma'am. You're expected in the main conference room. Would you like an escort?" "That won't be necessary," I replied. I know the way. In truth, I had studied the building layout extensively before arriving. As I walked through the security checkpoint, I could feel the atmosphere shift around me. Military officers of my rank rarely visited regional offices, and certainly not ones as young as me. Employees stopped mid-conversation as I passed, some nodding respectfully, others clearly curious about my presence. The elevator carried me to the executive floor where the day's meetings would take place. As the doors opened, I came face to face with my brother David, who was reviewing notes on his tablet. His eyes flicked up casually, then widened in shock as he registered both my presence and my uniform. "Rebecca? What are you doing here? And why are you wearing that?" Confusion and the beginning traces of alarm crossed his face as he noticed the Colonel insignia. "Good morning, David," I replied professionally. "I'm here for the project review." Before he could respond, my father turned the corner, engaged in animated conversation with two other executives. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to genuine concern in rapid succession. "Rebecca, what's going on? Why are you in uniform?" He glanced around nervously, clearly worried about what his colleagues might think. "Dad," I acknowledged with a professional nod. I was just about to head into the conference room to prepare. "The meeting starts in 20 minutes. "Correct," said one of the executives with my father, a woman named Barbara Jenkins according to her name badge. She stepped forward with obvious recognition. "Colonel, it's an honor to have you here. We weren't aware you would be attending in person today." My father's face went pale. "Colonel? Rebecca, what is this about?" I maintained my professional demeanor, acutely aware of the growing audience in the hallway. "I believe CEO Chen will explain everything during the meeting. If you'll excuse me." As I walked toward the conference room, I could hear whispered conversations erupting behind me. Years of military training had taught me to maintain composure under pressure, but I couldn't deny the small satisfaction I felt at their shock. The conference room was already being prepared by staff, setting up presentation, materials and refreshments for the high-level meeting. A young woman arranging water pitchers nearly dropped one when she saw me enter. "Oh, Colonel, we weren't told you would be here in person. Do you need anything special set up?" "Everything looks fine, thank you," I replied, taking my seat at the position reserved for the military liaison. Over the next 15 minutes, various executives and team leaders filtered into the room. Many introduced themselves to me with a deference that contrasted sharply with how my family had treated me just the previous evening. Several mentioned being surprised to meet me in person, as they had expected a video conference from the Pentagon. My father and brother entered together, both looking deeply unsettled. They took seats far from me, occasionally shooting confused glances in my direction. I focused on reviewing my notes, not giving them the satisfaction of an explanation before the meeting officially began. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the door opened and CEO Victoria Chen entered, flanked by her executive team. Victoria was a formidable presence, known for her direct approach and strategic brilliance. She had led Titan Defense to become one of the top contractors in the nation. The room fell silent as she scanned the attendees, her gaze stopping when it reached me. A smile of recognition spread across her face as she changed direction, heading straight for my position. "Colonel Sullivan," she said warmly, extending her hand. "What an unexpected pleasure to have you here in person. I thought we were scheduled for a video conference." I stood and shook her hand firmly. I was in town visiting family and thought this would be a good opportunity to review the project in person. Victoria nodded appreciatively. "Excellent initiative. Your presence will certainly make today's discussions more productive." She turned to address the room, her voice carrying absolute authority. "For those who may not be aware, Colonel Sullivan is our Pentagon liaison for Project Titan Shield. She will be overseeing the implementation of all security protocols and has final approval authority for all technical specifications and budget allocations." I could see my father's jaw literally drop from across the room. David was staring at me as if seeing a complete stranger. "Good morning, Colonel," Victoria continued with a respectful nod in my direction. "I look forward to your insights today." The meeting began with project updates from various team leaders. Each presenter addressed their comments to both Victoria and me, acknowledging my authority over the military aspects of the project. When technical questions arose about integration with existing defense systems, all eyes turned to me for answers. I provided detailed analysis and clear directives, drawing on my years of specialized experience. With each comment I made, I could see my father and brother exchanging incredulous looks, their worldview visibly crumbling before their eyes. When it came time for David to present his portion, his normally confident voice wavered noticeably. "As the team lead for user interface integration," he began, then faltered as he caught my eye. "I've developed a streamlined approach to—" "Please continue, Mr. Sullivan," I encouraged professionally, as if he were any other presenter and not my brother who had laughed at my career choice just 12 hours earlier. David stumbled through his presentation, clearly thrown by my presence and position. When he finished, I asked several pointed technical questions that exposed significant gaps in his planning, not out of malice, but because the project demanded thorough scrutiny. These are critical considerations that need to be addressed before we can approve this phase, I concluded. Please submit revised specifications by end of week. My father watched this exchange with a stunned expression, witnessing his son being held accountable by his daughter, the daughter he had dismissed for years as wasting her potential. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear to everyone in the room that I possessed expertise and authority that commanded genuine respect. My family was seeing for the first time what my colleagues and superiors in the military had recognized years ago. By the time Victoria closed the meeting 3 hours later, the power dynamics had been irrevocably altered. Colonel Sullivan will remain on site through tomorrow to conduct comprehensive security assessments, she announced. I expect everyone to provide her with whatever information and access she requires. This project is critical to both national security and Titan's future. As the room cleared, Victoria approached me again. Colonel, I must say your reputation is well-deserved. General Martinez speaks very highly of you, but seeing you in action today confirms everything I've heard from the corner of my eye. I could see my father hovering nearby, clearly desperate to speak with me but uncertain how to approach. The moment of revelation had arrived, and there would be no going back. The conference room slowly emptied, leaving only my family and a few senior executives who were engaged in conversation with Victoria Chen. My father hovered awkwardly at the edge of the group, visibly struggling to process what he had just witnessed. David stood beside him, his earlier confidence completely replaced by confusion and dawning realization. Victoria gestured for me to join her small circle, unaware of the family drama unfolding nearby. Colonel Sullivan, let me introduce you properly to our senior team. Some of them you may already know from project documentation, but it's always better to connect in person. I nodded professionally and joined her group. She placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a gesture of collegial respect that would have been unthinkable between a CEO and a junior team member. Everyone, this is Colonel Rebecca Sullivan, the Pentagon's primary liaison for Project Titan Shield. Colonel Sullivan has been instrumental in developing the security frameworks that will form the backbone of our entire system. The Senior Vice President of Engineering, a man named Thomas Bailey, extended his hand with obvious respect. Colonel, your reputation precedes you. Your research paper on adaptive countermeasures against quantum computing threats was revolutionary. We've implemented several of your recommendations already. Thank you, Mr. Bailey, I replied, acutely aware of my father and brother watching this exchange with complete disbelief. I appreciate seeing theoretical work get practical application. Victoria continued the introductions until she reached my father. And of course, you must know Michael Sullivan, our Director of Regional Operations. Michael has been with Titan Defense for nearly 3 decades. An awkward silence fell as everyone registered our shared last name. Victoria looked between us, realization dawning on her face. Sullivan, are you related? Before I could answer diplomatically, my father stepped forward. She's my daughter, he said, his voice carrying a complex mixture of confusion and what sounded like newfound respect. Your daughter? Victoria looked genuinely surprised. Michael, you never mentioned your daughter was Colonel Sullivan. The Colonel Sullivan who's been overseeing our biggest military contract. My father struggled to find words. I wasn't aware of Rebecca's current position. Victoria turned to me with a questioning look. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the personal undercurrents swirling around us. My family and I haven't had much opportunity to discuss my recent career progression, I explained simply. David, unable to contain himself any longer, stepped forward. You can't be serious. You're the colonel everyone's been talking about? The one with final approval on the entire project? Yes, I confirmed. I've been overseeing Project Titan Shield for the past 4 months, since my promotion to full colonel. 4 months? My father repeated, his voice hollow. You've been a colonel for 4 months and never told us? Victoria looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized she had stumbled into serious family tension. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Colonel Sullivan, perhaps you'd like to explain your role directly to the assembled team. Since you're here in person, we should take full advantage. I nodded gratefully for the professional redirect. Of course. I moved to the front of the room and activated the presentation screen, displaying the project overview with practiced ease. Project Titan Shield represents a $1.4 billion investment in next-generation cybersecurity infrastructure, I began, watching the expressions on the executives' faces shift from curiosity to genuine respect as I spoke. As the military liaison, my role is to ensure that all developments meet Pentagon specifications and security requirements. I clicked to the next slide, showing the project timeline and budget breakdown. All major design decisions, budget allocations, and implementation strategies require my approval before proceeding. I continued, the words landing heavily in the room. This includes staffing decisions for key positions and performance evaluations of all team leads. My brother went pale at this last point, undoubtedly remembering his boast about leading a team on the project. Victoria nodded approvingly as I finished my overview. As you can all see, we are extremely fortunate to have Colonel Sullivan guiding this project. Her expertise is unmatched, and her authority in this matter is absolute. The executives nodded in agreement, several making notes on their tablets. In fact, Victoria continued, Colonel Sullivan will be conducting comprehensive performance evaluations of all team leads over the next 2 days to assess our progress and resource allocation. David's face went from pale to ashen. Just last night, he had laughed about my career amounting to nothing, and now I would be directly evaluating his performance. As the meeting concluded, Victoria pulled me aside discreetly. Colonel, I had no idea Michael was your father. This must be quite a proud moment for your family. I offered a diplomatic smile. It's certainly a significant moment. Well, they should be extremely proud, she continued. Your work has been exceptional. I've told Michael many times how fortunate we are to have such a strong military partner on this project. My father overheard this exchange as he approached us, his expression now a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be dawning regret. Rebecca, he began, struggling with how to address me in this context. We need to talk. Of course, I replied professionally. I have a brief meeting with the security team. Then I can meet you in your office at 1100 hours. He nodded mutely, clearly unused to taking scheduling directions from me. As the executives filed out, I could hear them murmuring among themselves about the unexpected revelation. Did you know Michael's daughter was Colonel Sullivan? No wonder she rose so quickly, with connections like that. Actually, I heard she refused any family connections, did it all on merit. The last comment from Thomas Bailey carried clearly across the room, causing my father to stop in his tracks. The implication was crystal clear. I had achieved my position not because of family connections, but despite their complete lack of support. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the opportunity for long overdue understanding. At precisely 11:00 a.m., I knocked on the door of my father's office. Through the glass partition, I could see not just my father, but my mother and brother as well. Someone had clearly called my mother to come to the office after the morning's revelations. Enter, my father called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I stepped inside, still in full uniform, and closed the door behind me. My mother, Patricia, sat perched on the edge of a chair, her expression fluctuating between confusion and what looked almost like fear. David stood by the window, arms crossed defensively. Please, sit down, my father offered, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Thank you, but I prefer to stand, I replied automatically, adopting the at-ease position with my hands clasped behind my back. An uncomfortable silence filled the room until my father finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us? His voice carried years of bewilderment. All this time we thought— You thought what, Dad? I asked calmly. That I was wasting my potential? That I would never amount to anything in the military? That I was hiding from real competition? I quoted their various dismissals over the years without raising my voice. We didn't know, my mother interjected weakly. How could we know if you never told us? I sent you invitations to every promotion ceremony, I replied matter-of-factly. I called after each new assignment. I emailed articles when my work was declassified enough to be recognized publicly. But a colonel, my father said, still struggling with the concept. That's equivalent to a corporate vice president. Approximately, yes, I confirmed. And you have authority over our contract? David asked, his tone still carrying a hint of accusation. Is that why you came home now? To ambush us and embarrass me in front of Victoria? I came home because it's been 5 years, and despite everything, you're my family, I replied evenly. The timing with the contract review was coincidental, though admittedly convenient. Convenient? My father repeated bitterly. You show up at my workplace in uniform without warning. Do you have any idea how this looks? People will think I use nepotism to get my daughter assigned to our project. I had to laugh at the irony. Dad, I've spent my entire career avoiding any connection to your company precisely to prevent that perception. General Martinez assigned me to this project because of my expertise in adaptive cybersecurity systems and my track record with similar implementations. General Martinez? My mother asked. My mentor and commanding officer, I explained. She's been what you could have been all these years. Supportive, challenging when necessary, proud of my accomplishments. The words hit home, and I saw my mother flinch visibly. So this was all about showing us up, David demanded, making us look foolish for not believing in your military career. No, I said firmly. This was about doing my job, the job I've trained for, sacrificed for, and excelled at. The fact that you never took it seriously is not my responsibility. My father stood up, anger finally breaking through his shock. You could have warned us. You deliberately let us go on believing you were still some junior officer pushing papers, somewhere. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. When have any of you ever shown genuine interest in my career? Last night at dinner, not one of you asked me a single substantial question about my work or life. It was all about David's promotion and Jessica's condo. The truth of this statement hung heavy in the air between us. We always wanted what was best for you, my mother said weakly. No, I corrected her. You wanted what you thought was best for me. You wanted me to follow the path you understood and valued. When I chose differently, you decided my choice was invalid rather than considering that I might know what was right for my own life. My father sank back into his chair, the anger deflating. Your brother followed the plan. He's doing well. I'm happy for David, I said sincerely. But that was never going to be my path. I needed something different. David uncrossed his arms, his defensive posture softening slightly. All these years, we thought you were just stuck, going nowhere. I know what you thought, I replied. You made it abundantly clear every time we spoke. You'll never be anything in the military. Those were your exact words last night, David. He had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't know. You never asked, I pointed out. None of you did. My mother stood up suddenly, her expression shifting into damage control mode. Well, now we know, and of course we're very proud. Very proud indeed. I always told your father that the military was a respectable career. The revisionist history was so typical that I almost smiled. Mom, please don't do that. Don't pretend you've been supportive all along. It diminishes any chance of honest reconciliation. Her mouth opened and closed, unused to being directly contradicted. Rebecca, my father said, using my name instead, of my rank for the first time since the meeting. What do you want from us now? An apology? Public recognition? What? What I've always wanted, I replied simply. Respect for my choices. Acknowledgement that my path, while different from what you planned, has value and meaning. That's all I've ever asked for. The room fell silent again as they absorbed my words. Finally, my father stood and approached me. For a moment, I thought, he might try to hug me, but he stopped and extended his hand formally instead. "Colonel Sullivan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you an apology, a significant one. I failed to recognize your achievements and dismissed your career out of ignorance and prejudice. I was wrong." The formality of his approach was so characteristic of him, yet the admission was entirely new. I accepted his handshake firmly. "Thank you, Dad." "I still don't understand everything about what you do," he continued. "But I'd like to learn, if you're willing to teach me." It was more than I had expected, and I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. "I'd like that very much." My mother approached next, less comfortable with direct apologies. "We should have come to your ceremonies," she said instead. I would have liked to see you recognized." It was as close to an apology as she could manage in the moment, and I accepted it with a nod. David remained by the window, clearly struggling internally. Finally, he spoke. "So you outrank me by a lot." "This isn't a competition, David," I said gently. "It always has been, though," he replied with surprising insight. "Mom and Dad set us up that way from the beginning. I just had the advantage of following the path they already approved of." It was the most honest thing my brother had said to me in years. "We chose different paths," I said. "Both have value." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, what I saw in that meeting today, I could never do what you do. The technical knowledge alone, not to mention the leadership presence, it was impressive. Really impressive." Coming from David, this was equivalent to a full apology, and I felt the last of my defensive walls begin to lower. "Thank you." My father cleared his throat. "Victoria wants to have dinner tonight with all of us, now that she knows we're family. She's quite impressed with you, Rebecca." "I know," I said simply, allowing myself a small smile. "Of course you know," my father replied, shaking his head with what looked like newfound respect. "You probably know more about this company's operations than I do at this point." "Only the classified parts," I said, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh from him, perhaps the first we had shared in years. The tension in the room had transformed into something different, something tentative but hopeful. There was damage to repair, years of dismissal and hurt to work through. But for the first time, I felt that my family was truly seeing me. "I have another meeting to get to," I said, glancing at my watch. "But I'd be happy to join you all for dinner with Victoria tonight." As I turned to leave, my mother called out, "Rebecca, She struggled to find the words. "I know, Mom," I said gently. "One step at a time." I closed the door behind me, leaving my family to process their new reality. Their daughter, their sister, was not a failure after all. She was Colonel Rebecca Sullivan, and she had earned every ounce of the respect she now commanded. I hosted my family for dinner at my Washington, D.C. apartment. The spacious 3-bedroom condo overlooking the Potomac was a far cry from my childhood home in Montana, but it had become my sanctuary over the past few years. The changes in our family dynamic were still evolving, but the progress was undeniable. My father Michael arrived first, carrying a framed newspaper article about the successful implementation of Project Titan Shield and my role in it. He had it professionally mounted and had been proudly displaying it in his office. "I thought you might want a copy for your wall as well," he said somewhat shyly. The article featured a photo of me in uniform alongside General Martinez and Victoria, Chen at the project launch. "Thank you, Dad. That's very thoughtful," I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. 6 months ago, he would have considered such military recognition irrelevant. My mother Patricia arrived with a homemade apple pie, my childhood favorite. Her attempts at connecting were still awkward but sincere. She had stopped making comparisons between me and David or Jessica, instead asking genuine questions about my work, at least the unclassified parts. "Your apartment is beautiful, Rebecca," she commented, looking around at the minimalist but elegant decor. So organized and tasteful. Military precision, I joked, and she actually laughed instead of using it as an opportunity to criticize my career choice. David and Sarah arrived last, bringing an expensive bottle of wine. The most surprising transformation had been in my brother. After the initial shock wore off, he had approached me with genuine curiosity about my work and career path. "So," he began as we settled in the living room before dinner, "I implemented those security protocols you suggested last month. The team thought I was brilliant for coming up with them." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you give credit where it was due?" He grinned sheepishly. "Eventually, after enjoying the praise for about 10 minutes. But seriously, the implementation has been flawless. The client is beyond impressed." "Good work," I said sincerely. "Your team executes well." This simple professional acknowledgement meant more to him now than any familial platitude ever had. He had started seeing me as a colleague worthy of respect, not just his little sister. My father, who had been examining the military awards displayed modestly on my bookshelf, turned to me. "I read that article about the cyber attack you helped prevent last year. I didn't understand all the technical details, but it sounded significant." "It was," I confirmed. "We caught it early, which was fortunate." "Lives were at stake?" he asked, beginning to grasp the real importance of my work. "Potentially, yes. Infrastructure security affects everyone." He nodded thoughtfully. "I always thought military service was about physical combat. I never considered the cyber battlefield." "Most people don't," I acknowledged. "That's partly why we can be effective. Enemies don't always see us coming." The doorbell rang, and I excused myself to answer it. General Maria Martinez stood in the hallway, her uniform as impeccable as always despite being off duty. "Colonel Sullivan," she greeted me with a warm smile. "General," I returned the greeting. "Thank you for joining us tonight." I had invited Maria to dinner partly because she was in town for meetings, but also because I wanted my family to meet. The woman who had believed in me when they hadn't. "Everyone," I announced as we returned to the living room. "This is Brigadier General Maria Martinez, my commanding officer and mentor. General, this is my family." My father stood immediately, extending his hand with the respect he would show any high-ranking executive. "General Martinez, it's an honor. I understand we have you to thank for recognizing Rebecca's potential." Maria shook his hand firmly. "The potential was always there, Mr. Sullivan. I simply provided the opportunities for it to flourish." My mother bustled forward graciously. "General, please make yourself comfortable. Dinner is almost ready." As we moved to the dining table, the conversation flowed more naturally than any family gathering I could remember. Maria shared stories about military life that helped my parents understand the world I inhabited, while carefully avoiding classified details. Rebecca designed a simulation program that's now standard training for all cybersecurity personnel, she told them over the main course. Her approach reduced successful breach attempts in training scenarios by 68%. I watched my parents absorb this information, saw them truly hearing about my accomplishments perhaps for the first time. "We didn't know," my mother said quietly. "All these years we didn't know what you were really doing." "You never asked," I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored those words 6 months ago. "But now you know, and that's what matters." After dinner, David helped me clear the dishes while our parents continued talking with Maria. "You know," he said quietly, "I spent years thinking I was ahead of you in the game of life, getting promotions, climbing the corporate ladder, making important connections, but you were playing an entirely different game at a much higher level." "It was never a competition, David," I reminded him. "I know that now," he acknowledged, "and I'm sorry for making it one." These moments of genuine connection would have seemed impossible during that painful family dinner 6 months ago. The healing wasn't complete, perhaps would never be fully complete, but it was real progress. Later, as we enjoyed coffee and my mother's apple pie, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Colonel Rebecca Sullivan," he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of pride, who proved that following your own path can lead to extraordinary places. We may have been slow to see it, but we couldn't be prouder now. I raised my glass along with the others, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in my childhood home for many years. The validation I had once desperately sought from my family no longer defined me, but their recognition was still deeply healing. In the end, it was never about proving them wrong. It was about becoming who I was meant to be, whether they approved or not. That they had finally come to respect my choices wasn't the victory. The victory had been in making those choices for myself all along. So what about you? Have you ever had your achievements dismissed by people who should have supported you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and triumph. Remember to share this with anyone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the best validation comes from proving yourself on your own terms. Thank you for watching. And remember, your path is valid even when others fail to see its value.